right, good morning again, and thank you for joining us for today's Hill Prizes information session. My name is Terrence Henry. I serve as Executive Director of TAMIST, the Texas Academy of Medicine, Engineering, Science, and Technology. We really appreciate the time and effort that goes into preparing your applications for the Hill Prizes, so we hope this session is useful to you and helps you create a successful proposal. For all of you joining us today, and for those that aren't able to join us but did register for the session, we'll be recording this session. We'll share a video with you tomorrow, as well as a link to the slides that we'll be sharing today. So we're excited to share with you some details about the timeline and process for the Hill Prizes. I'll briefly go over the agenda for today's session. We'll first go over the purpose and objectives, then the timeline and process. We'll tell you a little bit about the prize committee. We'll go over the selection criteria and scoring, the eligibility criteria and scoring and categories. And then we'll talk about the application guidelines and materials, as well as the funding guidelines and requirements. Once we've completed going over that portion of the info session, we will have time for Q&A. So if at any point during the session you have a question, please use the Q&A box in Zoom to submit your question, and we'll get to it during the Q&A portion of the session. We'll also have an opportunity for you to raise your hand if you'd like to verbally ask a question. Before we begin, I'd like to just say a few words about our organization. TAMIST is a statewide society with a mission to foster collaboration, nurture the next generation of scientists and researchers, and advance the greater research enterprise in Texas. We were founded 20 years ago in 2004 by our honorary chair, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, and Nobel laureates Michael Brown and Richard Smalley. We are composed of more than 345 Texas-based members of the three national academies, the National Academy of Medicine, National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, other honorary societies, as well as the state's 8 Nobel laureates, and our 22 member institutions. We'd like to take a moment to give a special thank you to our 20th anniversary presenting sponsors who are helping us celebrate our 20th year as a society: Breyer Capital and University of Texas at Austin. Thank you for your support. I'd now like to introduce the chair of the Hill Prizes Committee, Dr. David Daniel. Dr. Daniel is past president of TAMIST and president emeritus of the University of Texas at Dallas. He's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering. We'll turn it over to Dr. Daniel to tell you more about the prizes.
Well, thank you, Terrence, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or evening, depending on which part of the world you happen to be in at the moment. TAMIST is really thrilled to partner with Lyda Hill Philanthropies to offer the Hill Prize. Essentially, Lyda Hill Philanthropies is providing the money, and TAMIST is providing the process to evaluate applications and select the recipients of the award. Last year was the first year of the Hill Prize. We were delighted to, and a little overwhelmed in some sense, to have received over 160 applications for the Hill Prize. We selected 5 winners, had a wonderful ceremony, a public ceremony to thank them at our annual TAMIST meeting. We encourage you to go to our website, read about last year's winners, and perhaps picture yourself as one of next year's winners. Lyda Hill Philanthropies is just a phenomenal organization. Lyda Hill herself, we were so happy she was able to attend the ceremony personally. And the team at Lyda Hill Philanthropies are just a wonderful group of people to work with. So we want to express our sincere gratitude in their mission to advance research, support science in Texas, and make this a better place for everyone in our wonderful state. So could we have the next slide, please, Stephanie? The purpose of the Hill Prize is to recognize and advance top Texas innovators whose work could have a significant impact on science and society. And I want you to focus on that word impact. If I had to pick one word that is the single most important word in the evaluation criteria, it's impact. We're going to be looking for ideas that really could have an impact through business, or perhaps not through business, just on society in general. Next slide, please. We are not risk averse as we look at judging these applications or proposals, if you will. High risk, high reward ideas resonate with or at least did last year, and I think will this year with the review panel. What sort of real world impact might result from the idea that you would propose for support from the Hill Prize? Next one, please. We have 6 categories of prizes, therefore 6 prizes, which are each $500,000 as a grant. The prizes are in medicine, public health, engineering, biological sciences, physical sciences, and technology. And if you wonder why these categories, we have another award called the O'Donnell Award that TAMIS makes that's been phenomenally successful in advancing the careers of a relatively early career, at least by my age standard, researchers. And those same 6 categories are the ones that we employ for the Hill Prize. So that's why we have those particular 6. Next one, please. We'll provide more details, by the way, on all of that as we go through this presentation. We were extremely pleased that Lyda Hill Philanthropies decided to fund more than just the first year last year. There will be at least 3 more years of prizes. We added a 6th category this year in public health because we had some very interesting proposals that fell within the medicine field, and we felt those were compelling enough, as did Lyda Hill Philanthropies, to add a 6th category. We had another addition this year. Lyda Hill Philanthropies has committed at least $1 million of funding, at least, so that's just the floor, not the ceiling, in discretionary funding to support great ideas that might not have been selected as the winners. And this came about because we had so many wonderful competitive proposals that we looked at the other top ranked proposals and thought, gee, these are really terrific ideas. They align in many cases very well with the priorities of Lyda Hill Philanthropies. And Lyda Hill Philanthropies agreed. And so they have committed not only the 6 prizes of $500,000 each, but in addition, at least $1 million for those who were runners-up, if you will, to the winner. So that's great news as far as we're concerned. And by the way, discretionary funding, Lyda Hill Philanthropies will decide where to put that discretionary funding. They support a lot of scientific research and are very able to do that. We'll just be identifying the top proposals or applications and helping Lyda Hill Philanthropies look beyond just the winners to identify some compelling ideas that also warrant support. Next one, please. This is the timeline. Applications will open on May 1st and will close at midnight on May 31st, and we'll tell you about how that's going to work here in a moment. During the summer and fall, the review committee that I chair and the 6 subcommittees will be reviewing the applications through a process I'll describe in a moment. We'll announce publicly in January the recipients, and on the evening of February 4th at the opening reception of the annual conference, we will officially recognize the winners. And please note that date of February 4th. We expect all 6 winners to be available the evening of February 4th at our meeting location in Dallas-Fort Worth to officially receive public recognition for the prize. Next one, please. So in terms of the committee itself, the proposals are due on midnight, May 31st. The staff will then sort of organize everything, review to make sure all is appropriate. We can at that point consider whether the applications have been put in the correct category. It's up to you to decide which of those 6 categories, the applicant to decide which of the 6 categories your application will apply. The subcommittees that I'll identify in a minute will select 3 finalists within each of the 6 categories. We will then send those 3 finalist proposals out to external review. The external review will be conducted by National Academies members outside the state of Texas, so we'd be sure to get an external viewpoint. Those external reviews will come back to the subcommittees in the 6 categories, who will review them and then select the recommended recipient. The entire committee will meet, endorse the individuals, then recommend to a committee of Nobel laureates and breakthrough laureates who the winner should be. They will presumably approve, but if for some reason they see a problem, we'll work with that. And finally, the proposed winners will go to the TAMIS Board of Directors for review and approval. Next one, please. I'm sure this is available on the website, but just FYI, these are the members of the various subcommittees. You see the members of the Medicine Subcommittee, the Public Health Subcommittee, and the Engineering Subcommittee. One point I'll make later is if you see someone from your institution on the subcommittee in your category, don't worry about that. Don't worry about a conflict. That does not make anybody ineligible just because someone from your institution is on the review committee. That's up to us to deal with the conflict of interest. So this is really just for your information. And I just truly want to thank these volunteers. These are all volunteers. They're going to get a lot of proposals. As I mentioned, we had over 160 last year. So they put quite a bit of time in, and they have just been wonderfully diligent in going through the applications, and I want to express our gratitude for their service. Next one, which I think is the Nobel Laureate and Breakthrough Prize Committee. So one thing you can know is that your proposal is going to be reviewed from some extraordinary scientists, engineers, technologists, and health professionals. Next one, please. For those of you who were involved last year, just a quick update on what's new this year. We added a 6th prize in public health. The application will now require a cover page. And by the way, this is all set up, as you see on maybe the last bullet item here, with a new online submission form called Submittable. So this can all be worked online. It's a little bit transparent to you. Last year, we required 3-page bio sketches for the principal investigators. Some people said, well, can I use the 6-page or 5-page, whatever it is, NIH bio sketch? And so we changed it this year. If you'd like to use that, the NIH format bio sketch, that's fine. Last year, the citations or bibliography, list of references of publications did count toward the page limit, but there was a little bit of complaining about that. So we decided not to count your citation list in the page limit, give you a little more flexibility. But I want to emphasize the reviewers are not going to be impressed by a hugely long list of citations. They're going to be impressed by the strength of your idea, the potential impact of your idea, and certainly do provide references to key publications, but don't necessarily feel that you need, extensive citations. That's not really what the reviewers are going to be looking for. All proposed materials have to be in a 1-page PDF document. This is really more for the reviewers than you to worry about because you'll be using an online template to do it. Last year, some people submitted multiple pages for different, or multiple documents or PDF documents for different elements of the proposal, and the reviewers just felt it was much easier if it all came in one. So as I mentioned, there's an online submission form. You can upload and edit this up till midnight of May 31st. So just because you've submitted it doesn't, let's say on May 15th, doesn't mean that's it. You can't change it. Terrence, nod your head if affirmatively if I'm assuming that's right. Yep. So right up until the midnight deadline on May 31st, you can change it and you'll get an auto notification of receipt. Next, please. So how is the review committee going to evaluate and score the applications? I'm sure this is one of the things, or I would expect it to be one of the things at the top of your mind. These are the 4 criteria that the review subcommittees are going to use. Uniqueness of the idea. Is it a powerful idea? Is it impactful? Is it, if it's working on something someone else has worked on, is it a new approach or a new angle? We're looking for something that really has uniqueness, at least in some significant element, particularly uniqueness in the ability to have an impact, perhaps beyond what other investigators might be trying to achieve or in a different way. Potential for commercial application and or real world impact. We're not looking to fund basic research that might or might not have an impact. This is more bridge funding from idea to impact. Some might call it valley of death funding, if you will. And in order to have an impact, sometimes that means it has to get out into the commercial world. Or it'll never get utilized. But that doesn't always turn out to be the case. Sometimes to have a real world impact, the idea has to get implemented some other way, for example, by a government entity or a collection of people. So although the commercial application might be the primary way in which most ideas make their way to the real world, it's not the only way to have an impact. And we don't have a particular bias about how you get to impact. Just make it clear of what that pathway to impact might be. And by the way, one of the questions that has been asked is, are we looking for impact, in the first year or two of the work, or it could be impact 5 or 10 years down the road? And I would say we don't have a bias for near-term versus longer-term impact. Some ideas are either going to work or not work in the next year or 2 or 3, and some ideas are going to take 5 or 10 years to really fully develop and involve the impact. So we're open to both. What's key is to have a plan, a clear pathway, so that the reviewers could say, yeah, that's a great plan. If that works, we could see that pathway to impact. The strengths of the research group or leader and or team, how well qualified is the team to actually pull off the work? Do they know what they're doing? The ability and availability of key personnel and infrastructure to execute the work and achieve success. Do you have that ability? So the applications will be ranked by subcommittee members. We will then identify the top 3 within each of those 6 categories. So there'll be 18 total, 6 times 3, that will be sent out for external review. Next. I mentioned before, don't worry about whether or not one of the subcommittee members is just your institution. We have a robust conflict of interest policy for the review committee members. The review committee members may not apply. They may not participate in applicant teams. And all potential conflicts will be disclosed and discussed, and that may or may not lead to recusal from any voting, depending on what the nature of the conflict might be. Next one. Who may apply? The principal investigator needs to be a Texas-based applicant who is at least 15 or more years into their first full-time appointment after college work and so forth. And if you go back 15 years, that's 2009. I'm sure that may seem to some like an odd requirement. Why 15 years? I'll come back in a slide or two and explain why that's the case. The principal investigator must have been in Texas for at least 2 years at the time of application. We are looking to support Texas-based researchers. That's why. And you don't necessarily have to have been at the same institution or same company for the last 2 years. You could have moved, let's say, from one Texas company to another Texas company. So long as you've been in Texas working for the last couple of years, last 2 years, that checks that box. The team lead or principal investigator has to meet these eligibility requirements. And as I'll mention in a moment, the other team members do not have to. So, a collaborator could be younger than 15 years. It's just the principal investigator who has to meet that requirement. Each application has to have the approval of the cognizant institutional or organizational individual. You'll self-report that. But we do that because we don't want to get to the point where Lyda Hill Philanthropies is trying to give you $500,000 and there's some requirement we've made clear that is a problem for your organization, and they say, oops, we can't take the money. So that's why we want to be sure that the cognizant authorized individual supports the applications. And we would encourage institutions to submit their top 2 or 3 applications, but we aren't in each category, by the way, but we aren't requiring this and we aren't monitoring this. We like that it's sort of open for anybody to apply, but on the other hand, I would just note that last year, some institutions kind of flooded, if you will, the application, and not all of the applications were competitive. And I would just say that did not reflect very well on that institution. But that's a suggestion, if you will, that the institutions or companies might want to limit applications, but we're not requiring it. Next one. But our goal really is just to try to help limit or eliminate non-competitive proposals and not put institutions or companies in the position of, in front of the reviewers at least, of having that situation. Okay, why do we have the greater than or equal to 15-year requirement for the principal investigator? It's because we have this wonderfully successful Edith and Peter O'Donnell Award program that requires the winner to be no more than 15 years into their career. We're looking for early to mid-career exceptional scientists, engineers, technologists, and health professionals. And we don't want the Lyda Hill Prize to overlap with or interfere with or compete in any way with the O'Donnell Award. So that's why we have that in place. And I mentioned earlier, 15 years means after your first faculty member full-time appointment, or really if you go into industry after you graduate from college and start your work in industry, which is 2009 or later. This requirement only applies to the principal investigator. So question. One of you on the call is under 15 years and you'd really like to apply. You cannot apply or may not apply as the PI, but perhaps you have a close colleague or collaborator who does meet the criteria and who could be the PI on the project, and you could be one of the key team members. The only caveat I would put there is that the PI has to be significantly engaged. You cannot just go pick somebody, in name, essentially in name only, who meets the criteria with the plan to be, that person has minimal engagement. Someone who doesn't meet the criteria does all the work. I would just say the principle here is that it might be a great opportunity for a young or mid-career individual to collaborate with a potential mentor where they might be the PI. But they do have to be, they have to be the PI, not just the PI in name. Next one, please. If you applied last year, may you reapply? Absolutely, yes. We would encourage you to reapply, particularly with perhaps an even more competitive proposal. You'll have to submit a new application, however. You can't just, the last year's application does not automatically roll over into this year's pool. Let's put it that way. You must literally submit a new application, and of course, you must meet all of the eligibility requirements. Next one. An important question sometimes is which category should I choose? The categories, except for technology, that is to say medicine, public health, engineering, biological sciences, and physical sciences, are really focused on academic and health science center institutions. So if you're at a university or a health science center, a medical center, or another scientific organization, you really should apply to the academic and health center. I'll come back and mention a little bit of a caveat for the nonprofits, but that would be your category. A challenge is going to be, let's say you're a scientist working in the medical field. Do you submit in biological sciences, or do you submit in medicine? That's really going to be up to you. I can't provide, nor can the subcommittee really provide guidance on which one you should pick. I would just sort of ask myself the question, what is the impact? Is the impact really advancement, let's say, in biological sciences, or is it really, at the patient care level in medicine? And, those sorts of questions might guide you in selecting which category you should submit your application in. So the technology award is really intended for the private sector or business. So if you're a business, sort of said and done, you're going to apply in the technology category. And we expect to get applications in technology covering medicine, engineering, physical sciences. It can cover any of the one topic areas. It's not limited to a particular topic area, but this is really designed to help engage industry in the private sector. If you're with a nonprofit research institute, you have the choice of applying either in the 5 categories mentioned earlier or in the technology category. This will put you in a little bit of a bind to figure out where you should go. Should you go to the technology category, or should you go to the medicine, public health, engineering, biological sciences, or physical sciences category? I would just, in answering that question, ask myself the question, is my idea more like the idea that, let's say, a company might propose, or is my idea more like the idea that, say, a health science center or a university might propose? And if it's more like a university or a health science center, you might go with one of the 5 categories mentioned earlier. Or if it seems more business oriented or more impactful sooner rather than later through business, that might drive you to the technology category. I really want to emphasize, too, that the technology category is wide open to spin-out companies from universities. So many university and health science center commercialization offices encourage spin-out companies. So another question you might ask is, suppose I've got a spin-out company that's collaborating with the research university or health science center working together to advance an idea. Is the PI, the spin-out company, applying to the technology category, or is the PI, the university, applying to one of the 5 categories mentioned earlier? It could go either way. You need to decide that. But in either case, we encourage teamwork. We encourage collaboration. The recipient of the technology award this year, for example, is collaborating very closely with the university. So maybe the answer to the question is, where would more than 50% of the money go? Would it go to the startup company and the activities it's engaging with, or consultants it's hiring, or would it go to the university itself with the spin-out company playing more of a support role? But either one is okay. But I just really want to encourage those commercialization offices to identify your most impactful potentially spin-out company and consider perhaps encouraging that company to apply in the technology category. Next one, please. How do team submissions work? There has to be a single PI and team lead organization. And by the way, the $500,000 goes to the organization, the institution, health science center, university, company, whatever it might be, not to the person. It goes to the organization. So we want a single belly button, so to speak, that'll be the recipient. But there can be as many team members as the PI or team lead wants. It could be 0. It could only be, the principal investigator with no collaborators. Or there could be multi-organizations and a mix of health science centers, universities, companies, nonprofits, whatever team makes sense to make a compelling case that you have a plan to put this money to work to make a difference in the world and to have an impact. It's up to you to organize that however you choose to organize it. So they see the bullet items. There must be one team lead and one lead organization. Again, if it's a industry, private sector, or government entity, it should apply in the technology sector. Everyone else pretty much goes into the other 5. Unless you're a nonprofit, then you can perhaps go to either one. And although the team lead must be a Texas organization, we certainly want most of the Hill Prize money to be spent here in Texas, but spent by Texans doing Texas work. But that does not restrict you from having a team member outside of the state of Texas or even outside the U.S. Let's say your idea really needs the help of an incredible collaborator in France, and they might get a bit of the money from the Hill Prize Award, but that key element from that team partner is essential to the success of the project. that's fine. That's there's no negative associated with that. In fact, there's a positive if you demonstrate that you put all the elements in place for a winning idea and a winning plan to have an impact. Next one. The team must be concentrated in Texas. That's what I mentioned before. This is to support Texas researchers, but it doesn't have to be 100% Texas researchers. You may identify co-PIs. If you are the PI, you might identify co-PIs. For example, let's say there's a lead organization and two teaming organizations. I think it would be wise to have a co-PI from each of the two teaming organizations identified. I think this would give the review committee confidence that there's an organizational plan in place and a person of accountability at each of the teaming organizations. But you're not required to identify co-PIs. That's really your request. You can also indicate in your submission if you do have co-PIs that you'd like them to also be recognized should you become a winner when we recognize the winners. No maximum number of personnel per teams, but we only want the 3-page or NIH bio sketch for the PI team lead. And if you want to identify other key personnel or team members, you may, including a co-PI, but there's a maximum of 1 page on the bio sketch for everyone except for the PI, which is 3 pages on the NIH bio sketch. And again, the funding will go to the lead organization. You may make as many sub-awards as you like if you're a lead organization. That's up to you in order to figure out how to do that. Next one. Parents, I'm trying to remember when I hand this off to you. Am I at that point or am I still going through this?
We are here, so thank you.
Okay, well, great.
It's time.
Again, if you have questions, I'm sure there was one thing I didn't cover, and maybe you're going to cover that, Terrence, on indirect costs. Are you going to be covering that?
Yes.
Yeah, and the funding rule essentially is you have to follow your institutional funding rules because the money goes to the institution. You'll need to follow your funding policy. But thank you very much. I'll look forward to answering any questions you have. Let me turn it back to Terrence who'll really get into the nitty-gritty of how to apply.
Thank you, David. And thanks for all the questions and interest that we're getting in the Q&A box. We're answering some of them as we go along, but we'll do a recap at the end. And again, if you have questions as we move along, feel free to type them in the Q&A box. If you'd like to ask one verbally, we'll have some time set aside during the Q&A at the end. So Dr. Daniel did an excellent job of kind of saying what the committee is looking for in your proposal. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we want the formatting and materials of that proposal to look like for the committee. So all of these requirements are posted on the TAMIS website. They are included in the application guide. We've included a link to all of this in the chat box. And of course, you'll get a link to it in the follow-up email from the session. Would really encourage you to pay close attention to what we're asking for in the application guide. Those materials are really important to have follow the format so that our committee can do an efficient job of going through these mini proposals and selecting the best of the best. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to have a new application portal this year. It's called Through the Company Submittable, and that portal is going to go live on May 1st. So you'll be able to access it and submit your proposal beginning May 1st. The link will be on the TAMIS website. We'll also send it out via email. And as Dr. Daniel mentioned, you'll be able to re-upload or change your proposal during that application window through May 31st. So let's talk about what's required in this proposal. As we've mentioned, all of these need to be included in one PDF document, one single PDF. You're going to have a cover page that's going to include a statement about your proposal, 50 words maximum, as well as a summary, as well as some required information about the principal investigator and the team will be included and needed on that cover page. Again, you can only select one category for your submission, and just want to flag that 250-word abstract summary if your proposal is a new requirement for this year. So that's a change from last year. You're also going to want to include your main proposal, which is a 5-page maximum proposal of your idea, and then the biographical information. So as Dr. Daniel mentioned, for your PI, you can either have their own 3 up to 3 pages biography, or use an NIH BioSketch. For any other key team personnel, a 1-page maximum biography each. We'll go on to the next slide. Yes.
Terrence, before you go, if I could just jump in, I want to emphasize how important that 50-word statement and the 250-word abstract are. Imagine you're on one of these review committees and you've got 40 proposals, and you're go through step 1, which is down select to 5 or 6 or 7 to discuss which are the top 3. Many reviewers may not get past that 250-word summary. So I would be really careful with that. I'd recommend you circulate it to a couple friends or colleagues and ask yourself the question, does this make a compelling case that this idea could have a big impact? So just pay attention to that. I think you'll improve your chances of faring well in the review process, the better that summary comes across.
Appreciate that additional information and guidance. Thank you, Dr. Daniel. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. As I've mentioned a few times here, all of this needs to be in one PDF document. So that's going to make it a lot easier and efficient, again, for the committee reviewers to take a look at your proposal. We do have some format requirements, so it needs to be in Times New Roman 11-point font with at least 1/2 inch margins. We are not asking for detailed budgets in your proposal, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we are going to ask for as far as how you would use the funding in your proposal in a moment. Lastly, we are not requiring or asking for or accepting letters of recommendation or letters of support. That's not something that's helpful for this process, so please don't include those in your application. We can go on to the next slide. As Dr. Daniel mentioned, that statement is really important, the 50-word statement. It should really quickly talk about what your idea is, what your research is, why it should be chosen, and its potential impact. And then you'll have a little bit more room in the 250-word abstract summary of the proposal, which will also be in the cover page to kind of be a little bit broader and go a little bit more in depth before the 5-page proposal. Again, there's also going to be some required information for the PI and the names of the co-PIs and other team members on that cover page. Next, we'll talk about the proposal itself, 5 pages maximum. We've listed on here what we're asking for in that proposal. This is also all included in the application guide and on the TAMIS website. One new element that we're asking for in your proposal this year, which is the 5th bullet shown here on the screen, is the path to impact for your proposal. So how you're going to go from this idea to it actually making a difference in the world. That's something that the committee from last year felt would be a nice addition and helpful for them in their selection to include. I'm not going to go through each of these bullet points on the screen, but again, these are all included in the application guide. They're on the TAMIS website, and we encourage you to pay close attention to them as you're developing your proposals. You can move on. So circling back on the budget question, detailed budgets are not required for your proposal, but we do want you to include how you would use the funding in your 5-page proposal. So perhaps you would use it to pay researchers or for equipment, to work with some subcontractors. We'd like approximate amounts for each category. And it's really important that you demonstrate to the committee and the reviewers that your prize funding is going to really help you achieve your goal that's outlined in your proposal and really lead you to making an impact. So again, we do not need detailed budgets, but really just kind of some broad categories and how you would allocate the funding approximately for each of those. We'll go on to the next one. Talk a little bit about the biographical summaries. We've gone over this a few times, but it's really, again, important to adhere to these requirements of the application and make the committee help them as much as possible to make their work efficient. So you can have 3 pages biography or an NIH BioSketch for the PI or team lead, and 1-page max biography for the other key personnel. We've listed on here the 5 bullets of what you may include in your biography. Of course, if you're using the standard NIH BioSketch for the PI, that's great too. These are, again, included in the application guide and on the TAMIS website, so I'm not going to go through them one by one. but would just encourage you to follow that format. Next, we'll talk a little bit about citations. Again, as Dr. Daniel mentioned, this is something new this year where we are allowing additional citations and key references as an addition to your proposal, so they will not count towards the 5-page limit of your main proposal. If you're going to include citations and key references, they need to come in your single PDF after your proposal at the end. And again, as this has been emphasized earlier, these citations and key references are not going to be an important part of the committee's review process, but if you'd like to include a few key citations, you are welcome to. Funding requirements. So you retain full intellectual property rights if you are awarded the funding, but the expenditures need to follow the funding policy of your organization. As Dr. Daniel mentioned, we are not allowing overhead or indirect charges for the funding, but it can be used for salary support for team members. A couple other requirements are the funding that if you do receive the prize is that your PI must be at a Texas organization, and they need to stay active there for at least 1 year after receiving the prize. They need to be able to attend the prize ceremony on February 4th, 2025 at our TAMIS 2025 annual meeting. We do provide travel and lodging for the PIs to come to the prize ceremony and attend the meeting. If there's other members of your team, if you are fortunate enough to be selected for the prize that would like to join, the travel and lodging would need to be provided by your organization for that. Finally, there's an impact statement that the prize recipients will provide on an annual basis each year until they have used all of the prize funding. Go on to the next one. Again, the application form is going to go live on the TAMIS website on May 1st, and we'll also include it in emails to folks that are on the TAMIS list. So if you haven't signed up to receive announcements and communications from TAMIS, you can do so on our website. Strongly encourage you to do that. We also have a frequently asked questions guide that is on the Hill Prizes website on the TAMIS site. And there's a lot of information there that may help answer your questions as you prepare your proposals. So we'd encourage you to take a look at that too, and it's been linked in the chat. Okay, I'll bring Dr. Daniel back in, and we now have some time for Q&A. I'm going to go through the written submitted Q&A questions here, and then I think we have one raised hand that will come to you in just a moment to unmute you so you can verbally ask your question. So first question that we have is, can an industry researcher PI designate the funding to go to a university project related to the submitted idea? I'll partially answer this and then turn it over to Dr. Daniel to add more. But if it is a multi-organization proposal like this, there does need to be a lead organization. So if that lead organization is in the private sector, the technology category would be the best fit for your proposal. And subawards are allowed if you are selected as a recipient. So it would be up to that lead organization to handle the subawards after receiving the prize funding. Dr. Daniels, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, right. You had it exactly right. So then if it says, say, a university is partnering with the lead company, then a subcontract or whatever would be set up between the university and the lead organization. And the lead organization then can, sub out the work as appropriate to entities that can help deliver the results desired.
Great, thank you. And thanks for all the great questions. Love to see these coming in. So we have two that are related about the 15-year requirement. One is, what jobs count as 15 years of experience? Would a postdoc year, would those years also count? And do these requirements, the 15 years since your full-time appointment, also apply for co-PIs? So for the 15 years of experience, this is for a faculty position, full-time faculty position, tenured or tenured track. That's how we're defining it for the Hill Prizes. And really the PI must meet that requirement. There might be a proposal where you have two co-PIs instead of one lead PI. In that case, both of them would need to meet the requirement. As Dr. Daniel mentioned earlier in the session, If you've got a really good proposal and you want to bring a key PI on board that's really going to be an active member of the team that meets the requirements and the co-PI doesn't, that's certainly an option for you as well. Dr. Daniels, anything you'd like to add to those questions?
So just to clarify, vis-a-vis the question, if you're a faculty member at a university or health science center, the postdoc would not count toward the 15 years, correct?
That's correct. It needs to be a tenure or tenure track position.
Right.
Okay, question on the bios and bio sketches. So we are allowing for the PI for you to submit the full NIH bio sketch this year. And we understand those are typically, I believe, 5 to 6 pages. So for the PI, you can either do the full NIH bio sketch, which you will likely already have prepared, or you can do your own 3-page bio for the PI. So there is no page limit on the NIH BioSketch for the PI if you're going to use that as an option for your proposal. Would like to just remind again that any other members of the team, and it should really be the key members of the team that you include these for, biography is going to be limited to 1 page each. Okay, let me go ahead and see. Looks like Hal Edwards has a question. He's raising his hand, and I'm going to, I believe, unmute you if I can here, so you can, you should be unmuted now if you want to unmute on your end, and you can ask your question verbally.
Okay. Howdy, can y'all hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So first, thanks for answering the questions I put into the chat. But I guess so I work at Texas Instruments, so I'm actually not certain if we even have a way to receive the award funding. So if we were to, is there a way that a co-PI who's not the lead PI but at a university could receive it directly as opposed to kind of a sub-payment?
That's a great question. That's something we might need to discuss a little bit more, but Dr. Daniel, let me see if you have thoughts on that initially.
So I would hope you would have a mechanism at TI to receive a $500,000 award to do something. You would just have to not charge overhead. Could the money pass to a university with TI as a subcontractor to the university? Yes, but I would not want to see the award go to a university and the university keep 5 or 10% of the money, you know, and 90 or 95% of the money then go to TI, and so that's almost that doesn't seem appropriate. But if
Right.
it's a
generally,
let's say it's a partnership between a university and TI, you could choose to have the university be the lead PI and TI be a team member. Did I understand your question correctly? Was that what you were asking?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, I mean, usually when I invent a new technology that's considered innovative and useful, it funds itself essentially, right? That's the way big companies work. And so we don't really, I mean, I don't know, most researchers wouldn't say I don't need the money, but I guess I'm sort of saying I don't need the money. But on the other hand, university funding, the idea that I'm thinking about has had a strong contribution from a professor at UT Dallas that I collaborate with closely, and so it'd make a lot of sense to see if we can kind of kickstart the next level of that research.
So I would just say, as a general answer, not necessarily specifically to what your situation. We love the idea of a university or a health science center collaborating with a partner who could actually take the idea to impact. Remember, I said at the beginning, the single most important word is impact. And included this year is a requirement that you discuss your pathway to get your idea actually out there in the world. And in many cases, that will involve commercialization. And if you actually have a partner identified, certainly from the point of view of the reviewers, that makes it easy for us to evaluate the strength of the pathway idea. So in principle, all very good for that kind of a strategy.
All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you for your question. So there's a question again on the 15-year requirement, and this is a good question. is there any limit over the 15 years? So if you've had an appointment for 23 years or 24 years, that's an easy one to answer no. You really just have to meet that requirement of having at least the 15 years by calendar year. So your full-time appointment should have started in 2009 or earlier. It could have started in 1970. So there's no limit on the other end as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, and I would just add this year's 5 recipients are a real good sort of example of that. There's a wide range of ages, and actually some of them are National Academy members, some of them are not National Academy members. It's a pretty eclectic group of people, and certainly a very eclectic group of high impact ideas. So no top age limit.
Great. A couple questions we can combine here are about how many proposals you can submit, if there's a limit on the number of proposals. So we'll reiterate that you should only choose one category for your proposal. You can only submit it in one category. And you may be a PI that has more than one proposal in more than one category, but would expect that to be relatively rare. We would really encourage you to focus on your best idea, your best proposal, and choose the category where it best fits. So you cannot submit in more than one category your proposal, and PIs should not submit multiple proposals through various categories. There may be some instances where it truly warrants having let's say one proposal submitted in medicine, and then you may be part of another project that's submitting in technology, but we expect those to be relatively rare. Let me again turn it over to Dr. Daniel to see if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't recall that we had any, multiple proposals from a single PI in the last round, but it is conceivable that a real overachieving individual might have enough bandwidth in their work to be able, let's say, to submit 2 proposals, one in one category, another in another category. And I think the review committee would sort of ask the question, well, how do they have the capacity to do that, or do they have the capacity? And if you do, great. I would not discourage you from doing that. But at some level, just speaking as a reviewer, let's say you submitted 3. My guess is the reviewers would go, "Oh, come on now! They should have picked their 1 or 2 best ideas." So if you really do have that bandwidth, and they're in different categories, no restriction from you doing that.
So it sounds like there's not a restriction, provided that if you do have more than one proposal, it has to be in a different category, and it really has to be distinct and unique from your other proposal that you're submitting.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. All right, so where to include references and citations if you're going to include them in your proposal? Should they be after the bio sketches or right after the proposal? We haven't specified, since that's kind of a new element that we're allowing as an addition to the proposals. So let me see, Dr. Daniel, if you think there's a strong preference on that, but I don't know that we're specifying on that.
I think it's better, personally, I'd rather see the citations right after the proposal and before the bio sketches. That's just the way I'm accustomed to read. That's the order in which I'm used to it, but that would be my suggestion.
Okay, great. So we'll recommend for applicants to include any citations, references after the main proposal, the 5-page proposal, but before the biographies. That you will not be disqualified if those orders are switched, but just encourage you to follow that order, and then we may make that standard for next year.
Yeah, I might add a quick comment about the citations. I do think, although we're not looking for a long list of citations, I would say it would be to the detriment of a proposal if you failed to acknowledge the 1 or 2 most important publications relevant to what you're working on. I can imagine the reviewers going, "Are they even aware of the groundbreaking work by so and so?" So yes, don't have 50 citations or feel like you need to, but also it's in your best interest to make sure the few most important pieces of work most directly relevant to your idea and impact are cited, so that you can check that box from the reviewer's point of view that, yes, you're aware of the most important work that's been published.
Great. So we'll turn this next question directly to you, Dr. Daniel. If we're not a member of TAMIST, so not a member institution, but are a Texas-based nonprofit medical institution, will we be evaluated equitably against TAMIST organizations?
Well, we're not evaluating organizations. We're evaluating proposals from individuals. So yes, they're all treated the same. And by the way, there's no bias or preference toward a PI who is or is not a TAMIST member. As I mentioned, it's an eclectic group, or even one organization or type of organization against another. I would just say that. Boy, we got some great proposals. We had some it's tough competition. Let's be clear about that. There's just a lot of great people in Texas and great ideas. I hope that does not discourage anyone, but it's to get among the top 3 among a group of 30 or 40 coming from some of the best people. It's just not that easy, which is why asking yourself the question. What's the wow factor, if you will, associated with my idea? Can most everybody really grasp that if this works, this could really, make a difference? I think regardless of your organization, if you've got a great answer to that question, go for it. And we've also made a real effort here not to make this a burdensome application. It's only 5 pages, if you will, and so that is intended to make it pretty easy. One thing I would recommend against is don't take a National Science Foundation proposal out of your computer memory and just sort of repurpose it real quickly and paste it in here. I did see that occasionally, and that did not fly well. In some ways, having to write a short proposal may take more time than writing a longer one. But the organization, if you're a nonprofit scientific organization, great. We hope we get your proposals in, and the best ideas are highly welcomed.
Great. So this one I think we can move through quickly is, do you provide the reviewer comments back to applicants? The answer to that currently is no. As Dr. Daniel mentioned, we have a large number of applicants and interest, which is wonderful to see for the prizes. So we are not providing external reviewer comments back to applicants. I will note that if you are considered, if you're highly ranked by the committee in the process, we will let you know that at the end of the selection process and encourage you to reapply the next cycle. So that's pretty much the extent of the feedback that we can provide at this time. Dr. Daniel, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Something I forgot to mention earlier, right? So as we indicated, there'll be 3 proposals in each of the 6 categories going out for external review. So for lack of a better term, I'll just call this finalists, if you will, and then 6 winners selected among those 18 finalists. So when you submit, I believe there's going to be a box for you to check providing a permission to share your proposal with Lyda Hill Philanthropies. I mentioned they've committed to at least $1 million of funding over the next 3 years beyond the $500,000 prize. And what we're really looking to do is to, with your permission, if you check that box, pass the 12 proposals that weren't the 6 winners, but among the 18 finalists, onto Lyda Hill Philanthropies and give them the opportunity to go, boy, these look really interesting. We'd like to, even though they didn't win, we'd like to talk to them about a grant to their organization anyway. So I'm pleased that it's not just the winners who are going to get some benefit from this moving forward, but also some of the other great proposals that were very close to the top.
Great. Thank you, David. I'm going to try and squeeze in one last one since we're very short on time here. Are preliminary data to support the application permitted? Can you use preliminary data in your proposal?
Use any data you want. Just make the best case you can to convince the reviewers of the strength of your idea.
Wonderful. Well, we are out of time. We got through most of the questions. However, if we didn't get to your question, or if you have follow-up questions, shown on the next slide here, we have our contact info. Well, we have the website, and then you can go to that website and contact TAMIST. You'll also receive information on how to follow up with additional questions in the email that will go out to all of you. Again, you're going to get the video and slides from today's session, and also a link to the application guide and the frequently asked questions. So a lot of information is available, but please do reach out if you have follow-up questions. We're happy to answer them as best as we can. After we end the session today, you'll get a link to a survey. We'd love for you to fill that out so we can get some feedback on the session and improve these for the future. And if you can go to the next slide, we'd like to invite all of you to join us next year at our TAMIST annual meeting. It'll take place in early February in Las Colinas, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we'll recognize and celebrate the 2025 recipients of the Hill Prizes at the opening night of the meeting, which will be on February 4th. The TAMIST meeting is open to everyone in the greater research community, so we'd love for you to join us if you can. We'll wrap up now and just remind you that the prize submission form will be available on May 1st, and the deadline will be 11:59 p.m. on May 31st. So once the clock strikes midnight and it's June 1st, further applications will not be submitted. So please do get your application in time. Again, please reach out to us with additional questions that weren't answered today or aren't answered on our website or frequently asked questions. And I want to thank each of you for your interest in this exciting new program and for joining us today. Hope you have a great day, and thank you again. We'll now end the session.